Ashmore Estates today. I'm taking you to Ashmore Estates, a humble, almost solitary building standing amidst the vast cornfields of southern Illinois. Yet it's considered the most heavily and complexly haunted location in Illinois. The name Estates evokes images of wealth, of extravagant parties. But this building doesn't hide luxury. It hides 150 years of history filled with destitution, illness, madness, neglect, and death. This place has lived many lives, first as a poor farm for the destitute and sick, then as a private psychiatric hospital, later abandoned to decay and even used as a commercial haunted house attraction for Halloween. Before we step through this gateway to the past, make sure you've hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is invaluable motivation for us to continue this journey. Now take a deep breath, let's begin. Our story begins long before Social Security, Medicare, or any welfare system we know today. In the late 19th century, if you were poor, elderly, sick, or deemed insane, society didn't have much space for you. The only option was often the poor farm or almshouse. In theory, this was a safety net, but in reality it was often a one-way trap leading to misery. In 1870, Coles County, Illinois established its own poor farm on a 260-acre plot of farmland. This place was built to shelter the poor, the lonely, elderly, the disabled, and also the insane. The first so-called house built in 1870 was not the brick building we see today. It was a dilapidated two-story wooden structure measuring only about 38 by 58 feet, with a small attached kitchen. Imagine a tiny wooden building designed to hold dozens of people with all kinds of fates. In the first 9 years alone, about 250 inmates, the term used for those living there, passed through, and 32 of them died. Those who passed away unclaimed by family were buried in a pauper cemetery on the property, with an estimated 60 to 100 unmarked graves. To me, this is the very first foundation of the haunting. It's not a single tragedy, but the accumulation of hundreds of silent miseries, spirits forgotten by society, dying in poverty and sickness, buried in unmarked graves. Where else could they go but to linger on the only land they called home? In their final days, the living conditions in this wooden house were unsurprisingly horrific. A 1902 report pointed out a serious problem: there were no special rooms or procedures to handle violently insane inmates. This meant the elderly, the sick, widowed mothers, and orphaned children had to live alongside those with severe, uncontrolled mental illnesses. Imagine the constant fear not just of sickness and death, but of the very people sharing their plight. By 1911, the situation became unacceptable. A state investigation harshly condemned the building. The report described a place with vermin-infected walls, infested with bugs and fleas, unsanitary food preparation, lacking ventilation, and inmate sanitation being almost non-existent. The building was immediately condemned as uninhabitable. The state's condemnation forced Coles County to act. They raised funds, and in 1916 a new fireproof, sturdy brick building was completed. This is the Ashmore Estates building we see today. Initially, this was a massive improvement. The new building had modern plumbing, ventilation, and sanitation. It offered the poor a warm place to sleep, hot meals, and the opportunity to work on the farm for those who were able. Most importantly, the new facility allowed for the separation of the dangerously insane, removing a constant threat to the other residents. Someone who lived there in the 1940s and 50s recalled that the place certainly did a lot of people a lot of good. That they were warm and had good food. The era of poor farms was coming to an end, with the creation of Social Security after the Great Depression and the expansion of women's rights, allowing single mothers and widows to find work instead of entering the poor farm. The population of the Coles County poor farm dwindled. By 1959, Coles County sold the building to a private company, Ashmore Estates, Inc. Their new goal was to turn it into a private psychiatric hospital. This is where the second layer of tragedy begins to form. This first version of the psychiatric hospital failed quickly. After only 5 years in 1964, it closed due to debt. But it reopened the very next year, 1965 this time, with a new role accepting overflow patients from state mental institutions which were severely overcrowded. This is a critically important detail. Ashmore Estates now became a dumping ground for the system. It took in psychiatric patients and the developmentally disabled for the next 20 years. Although the owners tried to upgrade and build an addition in the 1970s, the building was constantly in trouble. In 1979, the Illinois Department of Public Health ordered the building closed after finding 22 safety violations, but it remained in operation. This is the second and perhaps even stronger layer of negative energy. If the poor farm was a place of silent sadness and despair, the psychiatric hospital was a place of mental anguish, of madness, of tormented minds. We don't have many detailed records of the treatments used here, but given that it received overflow patients from state facilities in the 60s and 70s, we can imagine just how heavy the atmosphere must have been. Finally, in April 1986, Ashmore Estates closed once again. The reason was also ironic. Government austerity measures led to the closure of the large state mental hospitals. The source of overflow patients dried up and Ashmore didn't have enough patients to stay open. The building was once again abandoned for nearly a decade. Ashmore Estates began to rot. It became a favorite spot for vandals and teenagers looking for a thrill. Broken walls, graffiti, and piled up debris. The energy of abandonment, of being forgotten, settled over the building. In 1998, a man named Arthur Colclasier bought the property for a meager $12,500, intending to turn it into his private home. What a crazy idea. Unsurprisingly, this plan failed partly due to constant vandalism. And then in August 2006, a new ironic chapter in Ashmore Estates history began. The building was purchased by Scott Kelly. Mr. Kelly, noticing the public's curiosity about the haunted building, had a business idea. He and his wife moved onto the property in a trailer to deter vandals and began cleaning up the building. And to finance the repairs, what did they do? They turned Ashmore Estates into a commercial haunted house every Halloween. This is a motif we've seen at many famous locations like Eastern State Penitentiary or the Ohio State Reformatory. Personally, I've always been haunted by this idea. You take a real place where hundreds of people truly lived in misery, sickness, madness, and died in solitude, and you turn it into a Halloween entertainment. You bring in costumed actors, add bloody effects and fake screams. What happens when you do that? Are you mocking the spirits that are actually still there? Does the energy of fear, even if it's fake, from thousands of Halloween visitors night after night, feed the entities here, or does it make them angry? One local historian, Mike Clean, expressed his discomfort with this. People grew up and lived their lives there, and now it's used for someone's entertainment. There's something just not right about that. And it seems the spirits agreed. During this time, flashlight tours and overnight investigations began to be held in the off-season. Scott Kelly, the owner, despite claiming to be a skeptic for religious reasons, couldn't deny the strange occurrences. He recounted a time when he was cleaning and heard distinct footsteps walking up the stairs. He called his wife's name, Tanya. No answer. He called again. Still silence. He looked outside and saw his wife standing in the yard by their trailer. She had never been in the house, so who was walking up the stairs? The fate of Ashmore Estates seemed destined for permanent instability. In January 2013, a storm with 100 mph winds, or a tornado depending on the source, tore the entire roof off the main building, causing catastrophic damage. The building was once again on the brink of total destruction. But But then in May 2014, the current owners, Robin and Norma Terry, acquired Ashmore Estates. They had no intention of turning it into a home or a Halloween haunt. They had a different vision. They began the massive task of cleaning and repairing and turned Ashmore Estates into a location exclusively for paranormal investigators. They've made Ashmore an incredibly friendly place for ghost hunting teams. They installed infrared IR lighting systems on the ceilings of major hallways to assist night vision filming, set up a base camp with monitoring screens, and even built heated and cooled bunkhouses for investigators to rent overnight. It's been affectionately nicknamed the Paranormal Hilton by investigators. This is such a strange evolution, isn't it? A building that started as a shelter for people with no home and no money has now become a comfortable hotel for people searching for those homeless residents from the afterlife. This building just can't seem to escape its fate as a home for trapped spirits. The current owners are also very active in researching the history and hosting meaningful events. They hold fundraisers for charities like the Lost Limbs Foundation for child amputees. They even host a Kids' Day where they teach children and their parents about the paranormal world and how to handle seeing an imaginary friend. They even offer daytime investigations, believing that the paranormal happens 24/7. Through 4 different historical phases: a dilapidated poor farm, a modern poor farm, a psychiatric hospital, and finally a Halloween ghost hunting site. Ashmore Estates has accumulated countless layers of tragic energy. The pain of poverty and being forgotten, the torment of mental illness, the manufactured terror of Halloween visitors. And now the constant curiosity of paranormal investigators continuously calling out to the spirits. It's no surprise this place is considered one of the most haunted locations. It has been fed by human emotion for over 150 years. Unlike many locations with just 1 or 2 prominent spirits, Ashmore is a true community of ghosts with many entities having distinct identities, personalities, and stories. One of the oldest and most tragic stories tied to Ashmore Estates is that of little Elva Skinner. This tragedy occurred in 1880 during the time of the first wooden poor farm. Elva, a little girl just shy of 5 years old, was living at the poor farm with her mother. One fateful morning, as Elva was preparing breakfast, her dress tragically caught fire from a stove heater. The flames spread quickly. She died a painful death from the severe burns. Her spirit is believed to still be attached to the land, even though the building she died in was torn down and replaced by the current brick one. Personally, I find this detail extremely important. It shows that the haunting at Ashmore isn't just a residual haunting tied to the brick building. It's something deeper, an energy that has taken root in the land itself. The pain of a child dying horribly in a fire seems to have left a permanent spiritual scar. Unlike other frightening entities, Elva's spirit is described as very gentle and curious. Visitors and investigators often report subtle experiences related to her. They feel a small hand take theirs or a light tug on their shirt to get their attention. This isn't a malevolent spirit, but a child's soul, perhaps lonely and just wanting to play, to be acknowledged. One of the strangest phenomena reported in the upstairs rooms is the sudden smell of rotting flesh or death. But just seconds later, that horrific stench vanishes and is replaced by a pleasant floral aroma. Many have linked this phenomenon to Elva. Could this be a reenactment of her tragic moment? The smell of burning flesh immediately replaced by the sweet floral scent of her funeral. It's a haunting multi-sensory experience, a tragic reminder of an innocent child's death. If Elva represents the quiet tragedy, the next spirit represents a fierce and somewhat aggressive attachment to the place. That would be Joe Bloxam. Joe was an inmate of the poor farm, but unlike many others, he was given a job, a purpose. He was the maintenance man, the gatekeeper, the caretaker of the grounds. He roamed the halls, worked in the boiler room, and considered Ashmore Estates his home. Joe's death was also tragic. According to legend, Joe was walking along the train tracks, possibly returning from the nearby town of Kansas, Illinois, when he was struck by a train. But he didn't die immediately. With severe internal injuries, Joe dragged himself all the way back to Ashmore Estates, only to collapse and die at the one place he called home. Personally, I believe this final act bound Joe's spirit to the building forever. To him, Ashmore wasn't a prison. It was his home, his responsibility. The fact that he crawled back here to die shows an unbreakable attachment. It's no surprise that Joe Bloxam is said to be one of the most key and recognizable spirits. People don't just see a shadow. Witnesses, including 2 actors from the Halloween haunted house, have seen the apparition of a tall man so clearly that they could make out his facial features. He's often seen walking inside and outside the building as if still patrolling his grounds. And if you want to anger Joe or some other maintenance spirit, just head down to the basement to the boiler room. This was his domain in life, and it seems he doesn't like visitors. This is one of the most aggressive areas in the building. Many visitors, especially women, report feeling a strong invisible shove when they linger too long in the boiler room. Owner Robin Terry also believes Joe dislikes women in his area, personal opinion. I don't think this spirit is necessarily evil in the traditional sense. Imagine you're an old grumpy maintenance man and this is your workshop now. Group after group with bright flashlights and cameras constantly invades your space, calls your name and asks silly questions. Maybe he's simply a crotchety spirit who wants to be left alone to do his work. This aggression has been noted many times. An investigator named Brad Kling reported a 25-degree temperature drop when he tried to confront the entity. Another investigator, Dan Williams, even described a strange attack. Not malicious, but more like someone just wanted to fight for fun. And he also smelled the full breath of the nasty broken teeth cigar whiskey kind of breath. These details paint a vivid portrait of a rough blue-collar spirit who is extremely territorial. Investigators in a sensory overload experiment in the boiler room, a person blindfolded with white noise blasting in their ears, reported terrifying experiences feeling fingers brush over their shoulders and hair, and hearing a group of women singing hymns or chanting. This suggests the boiler room may not just be home to one, but perhaps many spirits sharing the space. If the basement is a place of aggression, the upper floors hold a much more touching story. In one room near the front of the building, it's believed the spirits of 2 female psychiatric patients reside. Unlike Joe, these 2 spirits are described as good-natured, and the way investigators interact with them is incredibly special. Instead of provoking them with rapid-fire questions, many visitors and teams choose to sit down and read books to them, and they get responses. Many report that when they begin to read, they record strange noises, whispered voices, EVPs, and their EMF meters consistently signal the presence of energy. This is one of the most moving ghost stories I've ever researched. It completely changes the dynamic of an investigation. It's no longer ghost hunting, it's a human connection. Imagine 2 souls, perhaps patients who were neglected and ignored in life, now in the afterlife receiving attention and the kind gesture of someone reading to them. It's a powerful reminder that not all spirits are angry. Some are perhaps just lonely and crave interaction. Beyond these named spirits, Ashmore Estates is a symphony of all kinds of supernatural phenomena. Shadow figures seen constantly gliding down the long hallways, especially when investigators are alone. Strange noises, footsteps like Scott Kelly heard slamming doors and the sound of chairs being dragged across the floor. Disembodied voices, EVPs. Ashmore is famous for its EVP recordings. Many teams have captured clear voices. In one investigation, when a guide said, "Hello," A voice was apparently recorded right after, or during a spirit box session when a guide asked a spirit if he was nice, the box clearly replied evil. Physical contact, besides Elva holding hands and Joe shoving reports of being scratched, have also occurred. Visual phenomena. One of the most stunning pieces of evidence was when a chair moved on its own into a doorway. Another time during an investigation, a balloon that had been sitting still on the floor for hours suddenly shot straight up to the ceiling on command. Equipment malfunction shows. Like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters have all been here and documented evidence. Devices constantly failing, batteries draining, and cameras capturing strange anomalies are common occurrences. Ryan Bergara from Watcher BuzzFeed Unsolved recorded footage of a device on his belt being pulled by an invisible force. Ashmore Estates is a unique location. It doesn't have the bloody tragedy of Villisca or the industrial-scale torture of Trans-Allegheny. Its horror is quieter but also more persistent. It's the horror of being forgotten, of poverty, of isolation, and of a mind slowly fading. What impresses me most about Ashmore is its liveliness. The spirits here aren't just faint echoes, they have personalities, they interact. Grumpy Joe protects his territory, curious Elva looks for playmates. The two women quietly listen as the living read to them. And perhaps something darker lurks in the basement. This building, through all its ups and downs, has become a true home for these spirits, just as its motto says, "Some call it home." And now, as a paranormal Hilton.t, it's open 24/7 to investigators, ensuring these spirits will never be lonely. This constant interaction seems to have created an energy loop, making Ashmore one of the most consistently responsive locations we've ever seen. Thank you for joining me in exploring the story of Ashmore Estates. What do you think about the spirits here? Do you believe Joe Bloxam is still guarding the boiler room? And if you had the chance, would you dare to sit and read a story to the spirits on the upper floor? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to continue joining us on the path to unveiling the world's most terrifying mysteries. Goodbye and see you next time.